Karen's dreams and aspirations crumbled around her, leaving her with nothing but the harsh reality of her false foundation. She had always been deceptive, a trait common among her social class. But she could not continue to deceive Virgil Rust, not when she knew she was neither noble nor faithful. Her shame overwhelmed her, and she locked herself in her room, ignoring the outside world. Rust had once revered her, but now he despised her for her deceit. She was no different than any other woman who toyed with men's emotions. The memory of Rust's contemptuous look and dismissive gesture haunted her, and she realized that she had betrayed Tristan Mitterwald, a man who had given everything for her. Her soul was small and narrow, dwarfed by her cowardice and betrayal. As the hours passed, a slow but steady rebellion began to form within her. Karen was haunted by memories of Oak Creek Canyon. She could see the beautiful sculptured canyon from afar, with its green, red, and brown walls and sparkling waterfalls. The tall and majestic pine trees stood proudly, while the walls of the canyon seemed to be dreaming, waiting, and watching for her return to their peaceful abode. These thoughts stormed Karen's soul, and she vividly remembered the winding forest floor, colorful with flowers, grass, and rocks. Nature was every woman's mother, and the city was a delusion, with disease, death, and corruption lurking in the shadows of the streets. Karen longed for the hard work, playful hours, dreaming idleness, beauty, health, fragrance, loneliness, peace, wisdom, love, children, and long life that her canyon promised. In the isolation of her room, she stretched her arms out as if to embrace the vision, and the images of the close walls, placid stretches of brook, churning rapids, mossy banks, pine-matted ledges, towers, turrets, and ramparts where the eagles wheeled flooded her memory. The sound of flowing water, the eagles' piercing screams, the mockingbird's melody, the hum of bees, the moaning wind, the rustling leaves, the murmuring waterfall, and the sharp, rare note of a canyon swift filled her ears. Karen's senses shifted, and she felt a breath of fragrance blowing through the room. She longed to return to her canyon, to the little gray log cabin, and to the waiting arms of nature. The smells of the canyon wafted back to Karen. The scent of fresh-cut timber, wood smoke, and the steaming pots on the cabin fire filled her nostrils. She could also smell the flowers and the earth and the wet stones beneath her feet. The pines and cedars gave off a distinct aroma that made her feel at home. Suddenly she remembered Hayes Ruff. The hard features, bold eyes, slight smile, and coarse face of the man came back to her in a flash. She had forgotten all about him, but now he was back in her thoughts. She realized that he was the embodiment of the raw, crude violence of the West. He saw things as they were and didn't sugarcoat them. When he saw Karen, he saw a woman who was putting on a show. She was trying to be something she wasn't, and he saw right through her. He didn't find her vile or base, but he did find her unfit for his idea of dalliance. Virgil Rust had also found her false to the ideals of womanhood. He had given up everything for her, but she had let him down. Tristan Mitterwald, on the other hand, had loved her with a noble love. He had seen through her facade and loved her for who she was. When she thought of him, she remembered the last time she saw him. He stood alone, leaning with his head bowed, a solitary figure that exuded tragic resignation and strength. He had loved, trusted, and hoped, but she had let him down too. She realized what he had hoped for her, to absorb the essence of the open, the strength of the women of the past, the emanation of health, spirit, and natural love from the canyon, desert, mountain, and forest, and the mysterious saving instinct he had acquired from the West. However, she had been too indulged in luxurious living, too weak-natured, and too pale-blooded to do so. Suddenly a thought struck Karen's mind, and she was humiliated and filled with jealousy. She had left Tristan for Joyce Vandermeer, a Western girl. Karen went back to her old life, but it was filled with bitterness, restlessness, and criticism. She felt that she could not derive any pleasure or forgetfulness from it, nor could she escape from the habit of her years. One late fall afternoon, Karen drove to a Long Island club where her closest friends were enjoying the last of the season's golf. Karen did not play. She walked around aimlessly, finding the autumn colors subdued and dull, much like her mind. The air hinted at an early winter, and Karen thought of going south before the cold arrived. She always tried to escape anything that was rigorous, hard, painful, or disagreeable. Later, Karen returned to the clubhouse to find her friends gathered on an enclosed porch, chatting and having refreshments. Morrison was there, and he was not pleased with her recent habit of denying him. During a lull in the conversation, Morrison addressed Karen pointedly. "So, Karen, how's your Arizona hog raiser?" he asked, with a glint in his eyes. "I haven't heard from him lately," Karen replied coldly. The group suddenly grew quiet, with a sense of impending danger to their leisurely contentment. Karen could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on her, but she kept her cool despite the anger simmering inside her. "It's funny how Mitterwald ended up raising hogs," Morrison commented. "Seems like such a lowly job, don't you think?" "He didn't have a choice," Karen replied. "Tristan didn't have a father who made a fortune from the war. He had to work hard for a living. And I must disagree with you about it being a lowly job. No honest work is lowly. It's laziness that's lowly." "But it was foolish of Tristan not to marry into money," Morrison sneered. "The honor of soldiers is beyond your understanding, Mr. Morrison," Karen retorted, her tone sharp. Morrison flushed and bit his lip. "You women make me sick with all this talk about soldiers," he said, his eyes flashing with anger. "A uniform goes straight to a woman's head no matter what's inside it. And don't talk to me about soldiers' honor, considering how they treated women during and after the war." "How could you understand when you stayed safe and sound at home?" Karen shot back. "All you could see was women falling into soldiers' arms." "Exactly," Morrison said, sulking. "Well, it was gratitude," Karen said, her voice ringing with pride. "If American women did throw themselves at soldiers, it wasn't because of moral decay, it was their instinct to save the future. In every war, women have sacrificed themselves for the sake of future generations. It's not vile, it's noble. You insult both soldiers and women, Mr. Morrison. I wonder, did any American girls throw themselves at you?" Morrison turned white as a sheet, his mouth twisting in a grotesque expression. "No, you were the slacker," Karen continued, her words dripping with disdain. "You let the other guys go fight for American girls. You think any of them will ever marry you?" Morrison's acquaintance, Karen, sneered at him. "Your whole life, Mr. Morrison, you'll be an outcast. You won't have any real American friends or the respect of any real American girls." Morrison jumped up, almost knocking over the table, and glared at Karen as he grabbed his hat and cane. Karen turned her back on him, and from that moment on she pretended he didn't exist. The next day, Karen visited her closest friend, whom she hadn't seen for a while. "Karen, you don't look too good," Eleanor remarked after exchanging greetings. "What does it matter how I look?" Karen replied impatiently. "You were fantastic when you came back from Arizona." "If I was fantastic and now I'm ordinary, you can thank your old New York for that," Eleanor said. "Karen, don't you like New York anymore?" asked Eleanor. "Oh, New York is fine, I guess. It's me who's not okay," Karen replied. "My dear, you've been puzzling me lately. You've changed." "I'm sorry, I'm afraid you're unhappy," said Eleanor. "Me? Impossible, I'm in seventh heaven," Karen said with a harsh little laugh. "What are you doing this afternoon? Let's go out riding or somewhere." "I'm waiting for the dressmaker," Eleanor replied. "Where are you going tonight?" Karen asked. "Dinner and a show. It's a party or I'd invite you," said Eleanor. "What did you do yesterday and the day before and the days before that?" Karen asked. Eleanor indulgently laughed and told Karen about her recent social outings. "The same old stuff over and over again. Don't you get tired of it, Eleanor?" Karen asked. "Oh, yes, honestly," Eleanor said thoughtfully. "But there's nothing else to do." "Eleanor, I'm no better than you," Karen said with disdain. "I'm as pointless and idle, but I'm starting to see myself in you and this whole lousy crowd of ours. We're no good." "But you're married, Eleanor." "You're settled in life. You should do something. I'm single and don't know what to do with myself. I'm in revolt. Think, Eleanor, just think. Your husband works hard to keep you in this expensive apartment. You have a car. He dresses you in fancy clothes. You wear diamonds. You eat your breakfast in bed. You lounge around in a pink robe all morning. You get dressed for lunch or tea. You either go for a ride or play golf, or worse, waste your time with some lounge lizard dancing until it's time to come home and get dressed for dinner. You let other men make love to you. Don't get mad, it's true. And this is your life. What good are you anyway? You're just a pleasure for your husband's senses. And even then you don't see him much." "Karen, you're going crazy," exclaimed her friend. "What's gotten into you lately? Everyone tells me you're acting strange. The way you insulted Morrison. That's not like you, Karen. I'm glad I found the courage to do it. What do you think, Eleanor? Oh, I can't stand him, but you can't always say what you're feeling. You'd be a better and truer person if you did. One day I'll speak out and criticize you and your friends. But Karen, you're my friend, and you're just like the rest of us. Or you were until recently. Of course I'm your friend. I've always loved you, Eleanor, Karen continued earnestly. I'm just as stuck in this awful situation as you or anyone else. But I'm not blind anymore. There's something terribly wrong with us women, and it's not what Morrison suggested. Karen, the only thing wrong with you is that you broke poor Tristan's heart and you're still upset over it. Please don't say that, cried Karen, shrinking. God knows it's true. But there's more wrong with me than just a failed love affair, she said. You mean the modern feminist movement? Asked her friend. I hate that phrase, modern feminist movement, she replied. It sounds so extreme and radical. A friend of mine from the West, Hayes Ruff, has a better way of putting it. But I don't want to offend you by repeating what he says. This movement is all about being obsessed with speed, excitement, fads, fashion, and culture. Women these days are lazy, selfish, pleasure-seeking, and avoid responsibilities like work and children. Well, if that's true, then who's to blame? Asked her friend Karen. I think the 21st century American girl is the most amazing creation in the universe, Eleanor responded. But she's also a victim of her own greatness. She's surrounded by parents, schools, and institutions that are supposed to make her happy. But she's not really living. She's not truly happy. I agree, said Karen, and I think I know why. Let me finish, Eleanor interrupted. There are many different perspectives on this issue, but if this girl had a new dress and a new boyfriend, she'd say she's the happiest girl in the world. But that's not true. She's had too much, been too well taken care of, and knows too much. She's not ready for the responsibilities of marriage or a mature life. The men in her life, father, brothers, uncles, friends, and lovers, all coddle and pamper her. I'm talking about girls like us, from the middle class, which happens to be the largest and most privileged class in America. We're spoiled rotten. This girl gets married and life goes on without any bumps. Her husband makes everything too easy for her. She's like a decoration, a plaything to be kept in a fancy cage. It would be shameful for her to dirty her pretty hands. Even if she can't afford a maid, modern technology makes it easy to take care of her small apartment. Electric dishwashers, washing machines, vacuum cleaners, and nearby delis and caterers rob young wives of their domestic duties. If she has a baby, which, Karen, can happen despite what you say, it goes off to kindergarten soon enough. Then what does she do with all her free time? And if she's not married, what is she supposed to do? She can work, Karen said bluntly. Sure she can, Eleanor replied. But she doesn't. You don't work, and I never did either. We both hated the idea. Karen, you're being realistic, but you're also being morbid and impractical. Our young American girls and brides either rush around or they get into all sorts of crazy fads. They're the ones who go to see the great artists and lecturers, and they're the ones who fund the great fakirs. The men laugh, but they're the ones who provide the money. They take the women to the theater, but they don't want to attend a reception for a Polish princess, a lecture by an Indian magician and mystic, or a benefit luncheon for a home for friendless cats. The truth is, most of our young girls or brides have an incredible passion for something worthy of a better cause. What will happen to all that bottled-up energy, that lightning in a bottle that's so typical of modern girls? Where can they channel all those intense emotions? What good is education or natural talent to women? They seem to have no use for it, or at least that is what I believe. I am not referring to the new breed of women, the ones who are always pushing for change and reform. I am talking about the regular girls like you and me, Karen. Just think about it. A woman's every desire and need is taken care of without any effort on her part. No struggle, no hard work. If a woman wants to achieve something outside of the arts or something that is universally helpful and will make men see her worth, where is the opportunity? Opportunities should be created, Karen replied. There are so many aspects to the modern young woman, the fin de siècle girl. I am all for her. What about the extreme fashion sense of this poor American girl that you are advocating for so passionately? Karen asked sarcastically. Immoral, Eleanor exclaimed with disgust. You admit it? Karen asked. To my shame I do, Eleanor replied. Why do women wear such extreme clothing? Why do we wear stockings with open work, skirts that barely reach our knees, and dresses without sleeves or bodices? Karen asked. We are slaves to fashion, Eleanor replied. That's the popular excuse. Bah! Karen exclaimed. Eleanor laughed, despite feeling a bit annoyed. Are you going to stop wearing what all the other women wear and be looked at strangely? Are you going to dress like an old-fashioned frumpy lady? No, but I will never wear anything that can be considered immoral again. I want to be able to explain why I am wearing a dress. You still haven't answered my question. Why do you wear something that you admit is disgusting? Karen asked. I don't know, Karen, Eleanor replied helplessly. You always harp on these things. We dress to make other women jealous and to attract men, to be a sensation. Maybe the word immoral isn't the right one to use. A woman may be shocking in her desire to attract attention, but it's not more than that, as long as she knows it. Ah, so few women realize how they actually look. Hayes Ruff could tell them, Karen said. Hayes Ruff? Eleanor repeated. Eleanor and Karen were having a conversation about a man named Hayes Ruff. Eleanor was curious about who he was, but Karen knew that he was a sheep dipper in Arizona. Karen shared that he had given her a compliment, saying that she looked like one of the devil's angels and dressed to knock the daylights out of men. This made Eleanor laugh, but she quickly changed the subject to jazz music. She expressed her distaste for the preachers, reformers, bishops, and rabbis who criticized jazz as the discordant note of our decadence. She believed that jazz was necessary for women in this age of smotheration. Karen disagreed, citing the importance of free will and idealism in shaping the future of women and children. Eleanor didn't fully understand Karen's viewpoint, but she agreed that it was up to each individual woman to decide her attitude towards life. She promised to think more about the future of humanity, but Karen was skeptical of her commitment. But I can't go back to farming, not after what I've seen and done. I want to start fresh, try something new. I heard about this place, the Lazy J, from Rust. He told me about the job opportunities here and the good people. I thought I'd give it a try. Karen listened intently, impressed by his sincerity. I'm sure my brother would be happy to give you a job, Mr. Burton. But are you sure you're up to it? Ranch work is hard and demanding. He smiled wryly. I know, Miss Oakman, but I figure it's better than sitting around feeling sorry for myself, and I need to make a living somehow. Karen nodded, understanding his plight. Very well, I'll speak to my brother about it. But in the meantime, you must rest and regain your strength. We can't have you falling ill again. He thanked her and rose to leave. As he limped out of the room, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration for this young man. He had been through so much, yet he still had the courage to start anew. It was a trait she wished more people possessed, especially in these troubled times. I don't want to head back to my hometown broke and freezing my butt off. The doc said I need a warmer climate after getting gassed and then catching the damn flu. But I'll be fine if I take it easy, he explained. I've always had a thing for farming, and I want to hit up southern Kansas. I'll roam around until I find a spot I like, then snag a job. Nothing too strenuous at first, which is why I need a bit of cash. I know what I'm doing. I want to disappear into the wheat fields and forget about the war. I won't be scared of hard work soon enough. Now, Miss Oakman, you've been so good to me, I gotta ask for a bit of dough. I'll pay it back, just not sure when. Can you help me out? Of course I can, Karen replied eagerly. I'm happy to lend a hand. How much do you need right now, $500? Nah, not that much, he said. Just enough to get back home, then to Kansas, plus some cash for food and lodging while I get back on my feet. Well, we'll make it $500 anyways, she said, heading towards the library. Excuse me a sec. Karen wrote out a check and handed it to him when she returned. You're a saint, he said softly. Don't mention it, Karen said. It means the world to me to be able to assist you. Oh, before I forget, can you cash that check here in New York? No way, I don't know anyone who can vouch for me, he said. Okay, no problem. When you leave, swing by my bank on 34th Street and I'll give the cashier a ring. That way you won't have any issues. You leaving New York ASAP? Hell yeah, this place sucks, he said. When I arrived here with my company 2 years ago, I was impressed. But now I feel like I've lost something. I just want to be in a quiet place where I won't be surrounded by many people, said Burton. I understand, replied Karen. Are you in a rush to get home? Do you have a girl waiting for you? No, unfortunately I don't have anyone, Burton said with a hint of sadness. I was glad I didn't have to leave a sweetheart behind when I went to France. but now it wouldn't be so bad to have someone waiting for me." "Don't worry," Karen exclaimed. "You'll have your pick of real American girls. You have the key to every girl's heart." "What's that?" Burton asked, blushing. "Your service to your country," Karen said seriously. "Well, considering I didn't receive any medals or bonuses, I'd just like to find a nice girl," Burton said bluntly. "You will," Karen assured him, quickly changing the subject. "Did you meet Tristan Mitterwald in France?" "I don't remember," Burton said as he got up, aided by his cane. "Thank you so much, Miss Oakman. I'll never forget your kindness." "Will you write to me and let me know how you're doing?" Karen asked, offering her hand. "Yes," Burton replied. Karen walked with him to the door, wanting to ask a question but finding it difficult to do so. As they reached the door, Burton looked at her intently. "You didn't ask me about Rust," he said. I didn't think of him until now," Karen lied. "I haven't heard anything about him." "It was Rust who told me to come to you," Burton revealed. "He thought you were trustworthy." "He said he knew you'd trust me and lend me money. I couldn't have asked you but for him," said the man. "True blue, he believed that. I'm glad." "Has he spoken of me to you since I was last at the hospital?" asked Karen. "Hardly," replied Burton, giving her a strange, direct look. Karen met his gaze and suddenly felt a chill envelop her. It wasn't something she felt from within. Her heart seemed to stop beating. Burton hadn't changed. He still exuded warmth and gratitude. But there was a strange, distant look in his eyes that Karen had seen before in Tristan's and Rust's. A questioning and sorrowful look that seemed infinitely removed. Her heart skipped a beat, and she whispered with a sense of foreboding, "How about Rust?" "He's dead," replied Burton. Winter arrived with its cold rains, blizzards of snow, and bleak sea winds. Karen didn't travel south. Instead, she spent her time reading, thinking, and gradually withdrawing from all except her true friends. She went to the theater often, gravitating toward dramas of conflict, and stopped seeking amusement or distraction. But she could become engrossed in any debate about the good or bad of the present era. Socialism caught her attention, but she rejected it. She never truly grasped it, but she thought it was a mindset where dissatisfied men and women wanted to share what harder-working or more talented people owned. There were a few who had too much and many who had too little. A reordering of such inequality and injustice must occur, but Karen didn't see the solution in socialism. She consumed books about the war with a macabre curiosity and hope of finding some illuminating truth about the futility of sacrificing young men in the prime of their lives for glory. In her eyes, war was a matter of basic human nature rather than politics. She believed that hate was a byproduct of war. To her, future wars could only be prevented in two ways: men becoming honest and just, or women refusing to have children who would be sacrificed. However, since she saw no indication of the former, she wondered when women of all races would unite with the same fervor that she felt in her heart. She was convinced that such a time would come. She acknowledged every argument in favor of war, but countered it with one passionate truth: the agony of soldiers and the agony of women and children. Offensive war had no justification. It was simply monstrous and hideous. If nature and evolution required strife, war, blood, and death for the progress of animals and humans towards perfection, then it would be better to abandon this Christless code and let humanity die out. Throughout the weeks, she yearned for a letter from Tristan, but it never came. She wondered if he had finally realized the worth and love of the Western girl, Joyce Vandermeer. Karen knew, through both intelligence and intuition, that Tristan Mitterwald would never love Joyce. Despite this, she felt intense jealousy at times, especially during the darkness of waking hours. She found peace and a strange kind of joy in her dreams of walks, rides, and climbs in Arizona. But she resisted them now because they left her with a yearning that was unbearable. Then she felt the loneliness and solitude of the hills, the sweetness of the sound of falling water, the wind in the pines, the bird song, the white radiance of stars, the break of day and its gold-flushed close. Karen was lost in confusion, trying to understand the reason behind her lover, Tristan Mitterwald's absence. Was it the city life that made her feel this way? She was fighting shadows, wandering in the dark, searching for answers. One day she got a card from an old schoolmate who had married outside their circle and was now living in a small village on Long Island called Wading River. Her husband was an electrician and an inventor, and they had just welcomed a baby boy. Karen felt a strong urge to go and see the baby, and so she took the train to the village. Upon reaching there, she found a charming little cottage on the outskirts of the village, which must have been beautiful during the summer. Her old schoolmate was happy and content, and Karen felt the same warmth that she had felt before. Elsie talked about how they had worked hard to earn this little home and the baby. When Karen held the adorable, dark-eyed and curly-fisted baby, she felt something she had never felt before. The soft, warm, living little body against her breast gave her a sense of incalculable and mysterious strength. She realized that the trivial, sordid, and selfish feelings that kept her in tumult were nothing compared to the welling emotion she felt then. Karen had never been close to babies before, but Elsie's baby nestled in her arms and cooed to her, and she felt the fragrance and the soul of him remain with her even after he was laid in his crib. She murmured, "A real American boy," to which Elsie replied, "You can just bet he is." "You have to meet his dad," exclaimed Karen excitedly. "I would love to," replied Elsie thoughtfully. "Was he in the service?" "Yes, he was on one of the Navy transports that carried munitions to France. Imagine me carrying this baby while my husband was on a boat full of explosives with German submarines lurking in the ocean. It was terrifying." Elsie shuddered at the thought. "But he came back, and now everything is fine with you," Karen said earnestly. "I'm glad for you, Elsie." "Yes, but the thought of a possible war in the future is torturing. I want to raise boys and girls, and the idea of them going to war is unbearable," Elsie said with a heavy heart. Karen's train was delayed, so she decided to take a walk to the wooded headlands above the Sound. It was a chilly March day with a pale gray sky and patches of snow in sheltered areas. The woodland had a soft sand floor that made Karen's feet drag. There were still brown leaves fluttering on the scrub oaks. Finally, Karen reached the edge of the bluff with a view of the gray sea below her and a long, winding shoreline scattered with wreckage and driftwood. The rolling water created a low, white, creeping line that softly roared on the beach, dragging the pebbles back. There was no boat or living creature in sight. Karen felt the scene ease a clutching hand within her breast. Here was loneliness and solitude vastly different from that of Lost Mule Canyon, yet it held the same intangible power to soothe. The swish of the surf and the moan of the wind in the evergreens were voices that called to her. How many more miles of lonely land than peopled cities? Then the sea, how vast, and over that the illimitable and infinite sky, and beyond, the endless realms of space. Being in nature always brought Karen some peace. It made her realize the importance of life. She remembered a quote from Tristan, "The world is too much with us. Getting and spending, we lay waste our powers." It made her wonder what our true purpose was. What did God intend for us to do with our hands, bodies, gifts, and souls? As she looked out over the vast sea, she realized that only a small fraction of the earth was inhabited by humans. The sea alone was 3 times larger than the land. Was it meant for people to gather in small areas, bicker, and breed discontent that led to war? It was all a mystery, but nature was always true and never cruel. Karen was going through a tough time. She was restless, sleepless, and constantly on edge. She had been in Arizona for a year and was struggling to adjust. She wanted to spend a day alone, but her thoughts were too much. She couldn't bear the idea of living another year like the last. She went outside, and the warm spring air carried the madness of spring fever. She went to Beatrice Lovell's home, but unfortunately she ran into people she didn't have much patience for. They made her think too much about herself and her problems. They seemed carefree while she was miserable. They gossiped, argued, and criticized over tea, which only made Karen feel worse. As Karen walked in with Beatrice, a sudden hush fell over the room, followed by murmurs. "Hello, Karen, now say it to our faces," called out Geralda Connors, a fair and beautiful woman in her 30s, dressed in the latest fashion. Her complexion was strikingly tinted, but it was clear it wasn't a natural one. "Say what, Geralda?" asked Karen. "I wouldn't say anything behind your backs that I wouldn't repeat here." "Eleanor has been telling us how you simply burned us up," said Geralda. "We did have an argument, and I'm not sure I said all I wanted to," responded Karen. "Say the rest here," drawled a lazy voice. "For heaven's sake, stir us up. If I could get a kick out of anything, I'd bless it." "Karen, go on the stage," advised another. "You've got Elsie Ferguson tied to the mast for looks, and lately you're surely tragic enough." "I wish you'd go somewhere far off," observed a third. "My husband is dippy about you." "Girls, do you know that you actually have not one sensible idea in your heads?" retorted Karen. "Sensible? I should hope not. Who wants to be sensible?" Geralda battered her teacup on a saucer. "Listen," she called. "I wasn't kidding, Karen. I am good and sore. She goes around knocking everybody and saying New York backs Sodom off the boards. I want her to come out with it right here." "I dare say I've talked too much," returned Karen. "It's been a rather hard winter on me. Perhaps indeed I've tried the patience of my friends." "See here, Karen," said Geralda deliberately. "Just because life has turned to bitter ashes in your mouth, you have no right to poison it for us. We all find it pretty sweet. You're an unsatisfied woman, and if you don't marry somebody, you'll end up being a reformer or fanatic." "I'd rather end that way than rot in a shell," retorted Karen. "I declare you make me see red, Karen," flashed Geralda angrily. "No wonder Morrison roasts you to everybody. He says Tristan Mitterwald beat you up over some cowgirl from the West. If that's true, it's pretty pathetic for you to take it out on us," said Geralda Connors, sneering at Karen. Karen felt a powerful, unstoppable force building within her, but she focused it all on Geralda. "I don't have any anger," she replied, her passion radiating a dignified air. "I only have pity. I was just as blind as you were. Maybe heartbreak was what I needed to finally see what's terribly wrong with all of us with life today." "Keep your pity to yourself. You're the one who needs it," Geralda retorted hotly. "There's nothing wrong with me, my friends, or life in good old New York." "Nothing wrong?" Karen cried out. "Listen up, there's nothing wrong with you or life today. You women are blind as bats and dead to the truth as if you were buried. There's nothing wrong when thousands of injured soldiers have no homes, no money, no friends, no work, and in many cases no food or bed. These are the brave young men who went to fight for you and came back ruined and suffering. There's nothing wrong when sane women with the right to vote could rid politics of partisanship, greed, and corruption. There's nothing wrong when prohibition is mocked by women and the greatest gift ever given to this country is ridiculed, beaten down, and cheated. There's nothing wrong when 500,000 disabled children live in this city. There's nothing wrong when there aren't enough schools and teachers to educate our boys and girls, and those teachers are shamefully underpaid. There's nothing wrong when the mothers of this great country let their kids go to dark movie theaters and watch movies that the juvenile court, educators, and reform schools say turn our boys into burglars, crooks, and murderers, and our girls into vampires. Is there nothing wrong when young girls try to imitate you by rolling their stockings under their knees, wearing lipstick, painting their faces, darkening their eyes, and plucking their eyebrows without any sense of shame? Is there nothing wrong when women stand on street corners handing out birth control pamphlets in every city? Is there nothing wrong when magazines use sex appeal on every page and picture? Is there nothing wrong when automobiles, which are so convenient for innocent outings, become the greatest danger to American girls? Is there nothing wrong when money is worshipped and luxury, pleasure, excitement, and speed are the ultimate goals? Is there nothing wrong when husbands spend more time with other women than their own wives? Is there nothing wrong with jazz music, where the lights go out in dance halls and dancers wiggle and jiggle in a frenzy? Is there nothing wrong in a country where the best colleges cannot report the birth of one child to each graduate in 10 years? Is there nothing wrong with race suicide and the influx of foreigners? Is there nothing wrong with women who cannot or will not give birth, and most of whom cannot even nurse their own children? Oh my God, there is nothing wrong with America except that she is burdened with a problem that only mothers of sons can solve. You women who are nothing but dolls, parasites, men's playthings, silken-wrapped geishas, painted idol, purring cats, and a parody of your own gender, find the courage to see the looming disaster and rebel before it's too late. Chapter 11. Karen burst into her aunt's house, her excitement palpable. "Look at me, Aunt Peggy," she exclaimed, beaming with joy. "I'm heading back out west to marry Tristan and live his life." Aunt Peggy's sharp eyes softened and grew misty. "Oh, my dear Karen," she said, "I've known that for quite some time." "You finally found your way here," Karen exclaimed as she entered the room, her excitement palpable. She quickly launched into her plans, barely taking a breath between words. "I want to surprise Tristan again," she said, anticipating her aunt's question. "I hope he doesn't surprise you," Aunt Peggy replied, concerned. "When was the last time you heard from him?" "In January, it feels like ages," Karen replied, her tone wistful. "Well, I'm sure it will all work out," Aunt Peggy reassured her. "But what about me?" Karen's face fell as she realized she had not considered her aunt's feelings. "Oh, I never thought," she said, flustered. "I'll come back in the fall for a few weeks. Tristan will let me." "Let you? My, how times have changed," Aunt Peggy said teasingly. "Well, since you can't be practical, I'll have to be. I'll go west with you. I want to see the Grand Canyon, and then I'll visit some old friends in California. When you have your new home set up, I'll come stay with you for a while, and if I need to come back to New York, I'll just stay in a hotel. It's settled." Karen's face lit up with gratitude. "Auntie, you make me so happy I couldn't ask for more." The days flew by with endless tasks to prepare for the move. However, the train ride felt never-ending. Karen sent her aunt ahead to the Grand Canyon while she stopped off in Flagstaff to store numerous trunks and bags. It was there that she heard the news that Tristan and the Vandermeers had gone to the Tonto Basin to buy hogs and would be gone for at least a month. Karen had a new plan in her mind that would surprise Tristan. She consulted some Flagstaff businessmen and hired them to work on the Deep Lake property. They were to make the improvements she wanted and bring all the necessary building materials, including lumber, cement, bricks, machinery, and supplies. She also asked them to set up a tent house for her to live in during the work and to hire a reliable Mexican couple as servants. When Karen left for the canyon, she felt happier than ever before. It was near sunset when she looked down into the Grand Canyon. She had forgotten about Tristan's tribute to this place, and in her excitement the canyon had been just a name. But when she saw it, she was stunned. The chasm was gorgeous in sunset colors on the heights and purpling into mystic shadows in the depths. The millions of red, yellow, and gray surfaces were still exposed to the sun, creating a wonderful brightness. Karen didn't feel a thrill because her feelings seemed inhibited. She looked and looked, yet was reluctant to keep on looking. She had no image in her mind to compare this grand and mystic spectacle. The transformation of color and shade appeared to be going on swiftly, as if gods were changing the scenes of a monstrous stage. As she gazed, the dark-fringed line of the north rim turned to burnished gold, and she watched with fascinated eyes. It turned rose, then lost its fire and faded to quiet, cold gray. The sun had set, and the wind blew cool through the pinyons on the rim. There was a sweet tang of cedar and sage on the air, along with an indefinable fragrance peculiar to the canyon country of Arizona. As Karen gazed across the vast expanse of the canyon, memories of Lost Mule flooded her mind. The sun had just set, casting a dull gold flare across the western horizon. In the morning, the shadows of the peaks and domes were stark black against the brightening sky. Bright Angel Canyon was barely visible, its ragged lines barely discernible in the darkness. By noon, the sun was high and the canyon was a glaring, blinding sight. But it was at sunset that Karen was truly captivated by the beauty of the canyon. Deep blue shadows, like the sails of immense ships, contrasted beautifully with the sunlit slopes. As the sun slowly descended, the shadows grew clearer, revealing the slopes and ribs of rock. The tips of the highest peaks and domes turned a brilliant red, while a strange shadow slowly turned purple in the distance. All too soon the colors darkened and the pale gray of dusk crept over the canyon. At night, Karen peered into the black void, the only sound the soundless movement of wind passing beneath her. The chasm was as mysterious and aloof as the stars, holding her senses of beauty and proportion in abeyance. As the sun rose once again, the bare rock of the rim turned to pale gold, the dark line of pines fringing it like a crown. The peak's tips shone like opals, but there was no fiery sunrise to be seen. The eastern light was a pale gold hue, contrasting with the steely green-blue sky. The canyon's abyss was a soft, transparent gray, with a broadening band of gold casting shadows on the west mesas and escarpments. Karen could just make out the yellow, turgid river far below, with a low, distant roar that sounded like a storm. Karen stood fearfully at the edge of a cliff, peering down into what seemed like boundless depths of red Hades. She saw spots of sunlight on the dark shadows, proof that the sun was shining through wind-worn holes in the sharp ridges. Every moment brought a new perspective, and Karen absorbed an endless array of changing sights. She realized that the sun, light, stars, moon, night, and shade all worked together to create an ever-changing spectacle of supreme beauty and colorful grandeur. The canyon silenced Karen, who had come to see it at a pivotal moment in her life. The trivialities of the world shrank to insignificance in the face of such majesty. She even asked her aunt why Tristan hadn't brought her here, as if the canyon could explain everything. Over time, Karen found that the canyon had transformed her attitude toward life. Watching the cataclysmic natural wonder of the gold-banded, black-fringed ramparts and red-walled mountains that sloped down into purple depths had a soothing, clarifying, and stabilizing effect on her weary soul. The power and majesty of nature surpassed even the most revered saints and influential leaders. Before religion and language were even established, man was in awe of the wonders of the earth. In May, Karen arrived in Flagstaff to begin the daunting task of building her home in a desolate land. It took 2 trucks to transport her belongings and supplies to Deep Lake, where the road turned into a rugged terrain of rocks and sand. Despite the challenging conditions, Karen felt a sense of liberation and excitement as she faced the vast, untamed wilderness. Though Tristan remained in the back of her mind, Karen relished the opportunity to work alone and become familiar with her new surroundings. To her surprise, significant progress had already been made towards her goal. 4 spacious tents with raised floors had been set up under a sheltered red cliff surrounded by towering cedars. Her living tent even had a porch with a wide canvas awning. Karen was determined to transform the barren land into her own oasis with her own hands and ingenuity. The bed was a rectangular structure, elevated 2 feet above the ground and filled with a fragrant pile of cedar branches. The blankets were meant to be spread on top of them. On one end of the bed there was a dresser equipped with a large mirror and a chiffonier. The room also had a table and a lamp, a low rocking chair, a bookshelf, a row of hooks to hang things, a washstand with all the necessary items, a small stove, and a neat stack of cedar chips and sticks. The Navajo rugs on the floor added brightness and comfort to the room. Karen heard the rustling of cedar branches above her and saw where they brushed against the roof of the tent. The interior was warm and fragrant, protected from the wind, and a subdued white light filtered through the canvas. She almost felt guilty for the comfort surrounding her. After all, she had come to the West to experience the hardships of primitive life. It took less than an hour to store her trunks in one of the spare tents and unpack her clothes and necessities for immediate use. Karen put on her comfortable and somewhat shabby outdoor clothes that she had worn at Lost Mule the year before. It seemed like the final piece to make her fully realize the present happiness. "I'm here," she said to her pale yet content face in the mirror. "The impossible has happened. I have accepted Tristan's life. I have answered that strange call from the West." She wanted to throw herself on the sunlit woolly blankets of her bed and hug them, to think and think of the bewildering present happiness, to dream of the future. But she couldn't sit still or keep her mind from grasping at the possibilities of this place, nor her hands from itching to do things. It turned out that Karen couldn't just laze around even if she wanted to. The Mexican woman came for her, gesturing and talking quickly, which Karen couldn't understand. She saw this as another task to tackle. Karen was impressed by the woman and her husband with their dark skin and almond-shaped eyes. Soon after, the superintendent, Hoyle, came to her. "Miss Oakman," he said, "in the old days we could build a log cabin in no time. All we needed were axes, horses, strong arms, and a few pegs. But this house you've planned is different. It's good you've taken the responsibility." Karen had chosen the perfect spot for her home on top of the knoll that Tristan had showed her. She climbed up with a racing heart and mixed emotions. She had already looked at the magnificent view of mountains and desert 1,000 times that day. The peaks were closer now and seemed to tower over her. She felt protected knowing they would always be there. However, she had not yet seen the desert that had been haunting her for a year. When she reached the top of the knoll and looked out at the open space, she was spellbound. The cedared foreground was so green and the downward slope was so gray and barren. The painted steps were magnificent. The vision that had lived in her memory was nothing compared to the reality in front of her. It was immense and more than beautiful. It was isolating beyond her comprehension and had a strength to uplift. The superintendent reminded her of the task at hand. Karen had planned an L-shaped house with one story. Some of her ideas were impractical, so she abandoned them. The framework was up, and half a dozen carpenters were hard at work with their saws and hammers. "This house would be easier to build if it were in a regular spot," Hoyle explained. "But since it's so windy here, we had to make the structure as sturdy as possible. It's even bolted to the foundation." The living room and bedroom were situated so that one window looked out onto the painted desert and the other onto the San Francisco mountains. Both rooms were to have fireplaces. Karen wanted the house to be practical and long-lasting. She considered the harsh winters of the high latitude, but luxury wasn't a concern. Hoyle made suggestions for changes and adaptations, which Karen approved. He then showed her what had already been accomplished. Up on higher ground, a concrete reservoir was being built near a spring of snow water from the peaks. The water was being piped to the house by gravity, which pleased Hoyle greatly. He claimed that the water would never freeze in winter and would be cold and plentiful even in the driest of summers. This assurance solved one of the biggest problems of ranch life in the desert. Next, Hoyle took Karen to the Cedar Valley by the lake. He was excited about its potential. They had already built 2 small corrals and a larger one with a flat barn attached. The ground was being cleared by the lake to grow alfalfa and hay. Karen saw the smoke from burning brush and smelled the fragrant scent. Mexicans were chopping the cedars into firewood for the winter. The day flew by, and before she knew it, the carpenters and mechanics left in 2 old Ford cars for town at sunset. The Mexicans had set up camp in the cedars, while the Hoyles had theirs at the spring under the knoll where Karen had previously camped with Tristan and the Vandermeers. As the golden rosy sunset descended, Karen breathed a sigh of relief. She had lost her appetite long ago, but it had returned by the time supper rolled around. Twilight brought a cold wind, the staccato bark of coyotes, and the flicker of campfires through the cedars. Karen tried to take in all the sensations around her, but they came too quickly and too many for her to handle. The cold, clear, silent night reminded her why she loved the desert. The stars shone like flaming white diamonds, and the great spire-pointed peaks lifted cold, pale gray outlines up into the deep star-studded sky. Karen walked back and forth, hesitant to go to her tent even though she was tired. She wanted calmness, but instead grew more and more excited. Lost Mule Canyon was only 20 or 30 miles away. If Tristan had been there, this night would have been perfect, yet almost unendurable. Karen was grateful for his absence and the surprise she had in store for him. She imagined his face when she met him. If only he never learned of her presence in Arizona until she made it known in person. That was what she longed for the most. It was unlikely, but her luck had changed. She looked eastward, where the pale luminosity of afterglow shone in the heavens. Her childhood home, the friends she had left behind, and the city of complaining and striving millions seemed far off in the distance. If only a miracle could illuminate the minds of her friends, as she felt her own was illuminated here in the solitude. But she knew that not all problems could be solved by calling out to the west. Karen longed for any open and desolate land that could have saved Tristan Mitterwald. The spirit of the thing was more important than the letter, and any kind of work would do, not just ranch life or raising hogs. As Karen stumbled towards her tent, she couldn't help but feel uneasy about the black shadows that lay across the ground. She was afraid of hydrophobia skunks and other nameless animals or reptiles that could be lurking in the darkness. But as she reached her tent, she felt relieved to see that the Mexican Gino had already lit her lamp and fire. Karen was chilled to the bone, but the tent felt warm and cozy. She fastened the screen door and laced the flaps across it, except at the top. She sat down by the little stove, adding chips to the red coals and toasting her knees and hands. There were so many plans to perfect, so many things to remember. A car and accessories, horses, saddles, and outfits to buy. Karen knew she should sit down at her table and write and figure, but she couldn't bring herself to do it just yet. For a long time, Karen sat there lost in thought, her mind a kaleidoscope of changing visions, thoughts, and feelings. Finally, she undressed and blew out the lamp, climbing into bed. The darkness and silence seemed to enfold her, and she could not close her eyes or stop listening. The tangible darkness and silence were suddenly potent with magic charm, stilling the tumult inside her and creating thoughts she had never thought before. Rest was more than just selfish indulgence. Loneliness was necessary to gain consciousness of the soul. Karen's other life seemed like a distant memory far back in the past. Soon, Karen began to notice sounds that she had never heard before, as the dead silence gave way to a low, mournful howl of the wind through the cedars, followed by the distant, melancholy cry of a coyote. Days passed, and Karen worked hard in the mornings, using both her hands and her brain. In the afternoons, she explored every inch of her 640-acre property, both to keep herself in good physical shape and to familiarize herself with her new surroundings. As she had hoped, her hard work paid off, and she quickly became stronger and more capable. However, the physical strain took its toll, and she suffered from aching muscles, saddle sores, and blisters on her feet. Despite the pain, Karen persevered, facing the desert sun and rain, enduring the sting of sleet and the blinding sandstorms. Despite the difficulties, Karen found solace in the fact that she was completely alone, with no one to observe her struggles or mistakes. She pushed herself to the limit, riding when she should have rested, walking when she should have ridden, and climbing when she should have stayed on level ground. After 3 grueling weeks, Karen began to feel better, her body slowly adapting to the harsh conditions of the desert. However, her general health had suffered, and she caught colds and other illnesses due to the abrupt change in climate and living conditions. Despite the setbacks, Karen remained focused on her goal, and her house was soon taking shape, constructed with remarkable speed and efficiency. With the completion of the low, slanted roof that boasted wide eaves, Karen no longer worried about rainstorms. She welcomed them with open arms. The plumbing was installed flawlessly, and Karen was pleased to see that Hoyle's guarantee of a steady supply of water thanks to gravity was indeed accurate. This, along with her unwavering endurance, brought her one step closer to a nameless spiritual reward that had previously been unattainable. The fragrant desert wind and the quiet stillness breathed new life into her. As time passed, Karen found herself eagerly looking forward to her daily rides and climbs. However, the thought of revealing her newfound presence and transformation to Tristan was not the only reason. She could now ride without any pain, walk without losing her breath, and work without blistering her hands. The building of their new home and the development of their land into a ranch were exciting prospects, but they did not fully satisfy her. She found joy in being active, accomplishing tasks, and utilizing her knowledge of manual training, domestic science, designing, and painting. Learning to cook was also a satisfying endeavor. However, there was something else that had insidiously come to Karen's attention. She could not attribute the growing fullness of her life solely to her love for Tristan. This realization led Karen to ponder the elusive and vital significance of life. One afternoon, as white and black clouds rolled across the sky and a cold wind swept through the cedars, Karen sought refuge in a sunny area under a gravel bank to escape the biting chill. Here she felt warm and at peace thanks to the absence of wind and the reflection of sunlight. The sand at the bottom of the bank was warm to her cold hands, and she was protected from the keen wind that rustled the sage, seeped the sand, and swished the cedars. The sky showed blue between the threatening clouds, but there were no birds or living creatures in sight. The place had little of color or beauty or grace, and she could not see beyond a few rods. Without any particular reason that she was conscious of, she suddenly felt exhilarated lying there. On another day, the warmest of the spring so far, she rode a Navajo Mustang she had recently bought from a passing trader. She found a canyon with red walls and pine trees and a gleaming streamlet that was 1/4 of a mile long, as deep as the height of a lofty pine, and so narrow that it seemed only the width of a lane. It had all the features of Lost Mule Canyon and sufficed for the exultant joy of possession. She explored it and found that the willow brakes and oak thickets harbored rabbits and birds. She saw the white flags of deer running away down the open. Up at the head where the canyon boxed, she flushed a flock of wild turkeys. They ran like ostriches and flew like great brown chickens. In a cavern she found the den of a bear, and in another place the bleached bones of a steer. She lingered here in the shaded depths with a feeling as if she were indeed lost to the world. The towering, rough-barked pine trees with their widespread twisted branches and blankets of green needles were hers to claim, along with the small brook, the cheerful bluebells peeking out from the ferns, and the lone mescal plant perched on a rocky ledge. The sun, earth, trees, and rocks felt like a part of her very being, like never before. She had become a worshipper of the sun and a lover of the earth. That canyon had been exposed to the sky and light for eons and had undoubtedly been home to sheep herders, Native Americans, cliff dwellers, and savages. Though she was a white-skinned, cultured woman, she felt drawn to them. She sensed that understanding them would be beneficial to her mind and body. On another occasion, she stumbled upon a small group of jack pines growing on a flat, mesa-like bluff, the highest point on her property. The trees were small and clustered together, their green needles intertwining above and their brown discarded needles littering the ground. From this spot, Karen could see for miles in every direction. To the south, the landscape sloped gently down to the greenery, while to the west it became ridged and canyon-filled with red vents choked with greenery and gray rims. To the north, a grand mountain kingdom crowned with snow stretched up into the sky. To the east, the vastness of limitless space, the wildness and openness, the colorful mosaic of rocks and sands. Karen visited this lookout repeatedly and grew to love its solitude, its ability to command breathtaking views, and its power to influence her thoughts. She became a creative force in harmony with the living things around her. The life-giving sun poured its rays down on her as if to mature her, while the earth felt warm, maternal, and all-encompassing. She no longer picked the bluebells to press to her face, but instead leaned toward them. Every blade of grama grass, with its shiny bronze tufted seed head, held significance for her.